Some secrets travel thousands of miles before finding their way home. Sarah Mitchell had carried hers across 3 states, through sleepless nights and endless highways, clutching a manila envelope that would either heal a broken family or destroy what little remained of it. The dust cloud behind her pickup truck settled as she pulled into the driveway of the Double R Ranch, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times, but now, watching the tall figure emerge from the barn with the dying sun painting everything golden, she realized no amount of preparation could ready someone for delivering news that would change everything. The gravel crunched beneath Sarah's boots as she stepped out of her dusty pickup truck. The late afternoon sun hung low in the Texas sky, casting long shadows across the sprawling Double R Ranch. She had driven for 3 days straight, stopping only for gas and coffee, driven by a promise she'd made to a dying woman and a truth that had eaten at her conscience for 6 long months. Robert "Buck" Richardson looked up from the fence post he was mending, his withered hands pausing mid-swing with the hammer. At 52, Buck had the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from years of honest work under the sun. His dark hair, now streaked with silver at the temples, caught the golden light as he straightened up, his blue eyes squinting against the glare to get a better look at his unexpected visitor. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Even after all these years, even with the lines that time and hardship had carved into his face, Robert Richardson still had the power to make her heart skip. But she wasn't here for herself. She was here for Emma. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Buck's voice carried across the yard, polite but cautious. Strangers didn't often find their way to the Double R, especially not young women traveling alone at dusk. Sarah forced her legs to move, each step feeling heavier than the last. The manila envelope in her hand seemed to burn against her palm. "Mr. Richardson? I'm Sarah Mitchell. I need to talk to you about Emma Rodriguez." The hammer slipped from Buck's fingers, clattering against the wooden fence post before falling into the dust. His face went pale beneath his tan, and, for a moment, Sarah thought he might collapse. She watched as 23 years of carefully buried emotions flickered across his features like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Emma," he whispered, the name barely audible above the evening breeze that rustled through the mesquite trees. How is she?" Sarah's throat tightened. This was the part she'd dreaded most during her long drive from California. "Mr. Richardson, I'm so sorry. Emma passed away 4 months ago." The words hung in the air between them like a physical blow. Buck staggered backward, his strong hands gripping the fence rail for support. Sarah had witnessed this kind of grief before in her work as a nurse, but seeing it tear through this man who had clearly loved Emma Rodriguez with every fiber of his being made her own eyes blur with tears. "Cancer," Sarah continued softly. "Pancreatic. It was quick, but she had time to ask me to find you." Buck closed his eyes, his jaw working as he struggled to maintain his composure. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "You knew Emma?" "She was my patient. And my friend." Sarah took a tentative step closer. "She talked about you every day during those last weeks. About this place. About what happened between you two." The sun had nearly disappeared behind the rolling hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The ranch buildings stood silhouetted against the colorful backdrop like something from an old Western movie. In the distance, cattle lowed softly as they settled for the night, and somewhere a coyote called to its mate. Buck wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dust on his cheek. 23 years, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. 23 years I've wondered what happened to her. Where she went. If she was happy." Sarah's grip tightened on the envelope. "She never stopped loving you, Mr. Richardson. That's why I'm here." "I don't understand." Buck's eyes fixed on the manila envelope in her hands. "What is that?" "It's complicated." Sarah glanced toward the house, its windows glowing warmly with lamplight. "Is there somewhere we could sit down? This is going to take a while." Buck nodded toward the wraparound porch of the main house. As they walked across the yard, Sarah noticed the meticulous care that had been put into maintaining the property. The fences were straight and strong, the buildings well maintained, the gardens neat and flourishing despite the Texas heat. This was clearly a man who took pride in his work, who built things to last. They settled into wooden rocking chairs on the porch, the kind that invited long conversations and quiet contemplation. Buck disappeared inside for a moment and returned with 2 glasses of sweet tea, his hands trembling slightly as he handed one to Sarah. "Tell me about her," he said simply. Sarah smiled, remembering Emma's infectious laugh and the way her eyes lit up whenever she talked about her past. She was amazing. Strong, funny, full of life even when the cancer was winning. She worked as a teacher for 35 years, mostly with kids from low-income families. Never married, never had children of her own, but she loved those students like they were her own babies. Buck's face crumpled slightly at the mention of children, and Sarah realized she was venturing into dangerous territory. But there was no gentle way to deliver the news she carried. She lived in a small apartment near the school, Sarah continued. Nothing fancy, but she'd filled it with photographs of her students, letters they'd written her over the years. She was one of those people who made the world brighter just by being in it. That sounds like Emma. Buck's voice was thick with memory. She always saw the good in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the crickets begin their nightly symphony. Finally, Buck spoke again. "What happened to us, it's not what you might think. We didn't break up because we stopped loving each other. We broke up because we loved each other too much." Sarah waited, sensing he needed to tell this story his own way. Buck stared out at his land, his eyes distant. "I met Emma at a rodeo in San Antonio. I was 29, she was 26. I was riding bulls professionally then, trying to make enough money to expand this place. She was there with some friends, teaching school in the city during the weekend, looking for adventure on weekends." His weathered hands wrapped around the glass of tea, but he didn't drink. "She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Not just pretty, but beautiful from the inside out. Had this laugh that could make you forget every worry you'd ever had. We talked until the sun came up that first night, sitting on the tailgate of my truck, and I knew right then and there that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her." Sarah could hear the love in his voice, still strong after all these years. It made what she had to tell him both easier and infinitely harder. "We dated for 2 years, Buck continued. Best 2 years of my life. She'd drive out here on weekends, help me with the ranch work, talk about all the places we'd traveled together once I retired from riding. We planned to get married the following spring." His voice faltered, and Sarah reached over to touch his arm gently. "What happened?" Buck set down his glass and buried his face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red with tears he was no longer trying to hide. "I found out I couldn't have children," he said quietly. "Some injury from my bull riding days," the doctors said. Emma wanted kids so badly. She'd talk about them all the time, about teaching them to ride, about watching them grow up on the ranch. She would have made the most amazing mother. Sarah felt her heart breaking for both of them. "Did you tell her?" "I tried to. But every time I started to explain, I'd see that light in her eyes when she talked about our future family, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the one to take that dream away from her." The night sounds seemed to grow louder around them as Buck continued his story. "So I did the most cowardly thing I've ever done in my life. I picked a fight with her. A terrible, awful fight where I said things I didn't mean, things designed to hurt her so badly she'd leave and never look back." Sarah closed her eyes, imagining the pain both of them must have felt. "It worked," Buck said bitterly. "She left that night, crying so hard she could barely drive. I told myself I was doing the right thing, setting her free to find someone who could give her everything she wanted. But, God help me, it nearly killed me." "Did you ever try to find her? To explain?" Buck shook his head. "I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to California, gotten a teaching job out there. I figured she'd moved on, probably found someone else, started the family she'd always dreamed of. I hope she had, even though it tore me apart to think about it." Sarah looked down at the envelope in her lap, feeling the weight of what it contained. "Mr. Richardson." Buck, there's something else Emma wanted you to know. Something she couldn't bring herself to tell you during that fight. Buck's eyes fixed on hers, and she saw fear there. Fear of more pain, more revelations that would shake the carefully constructed life he'd built for himself. She was pregnant, Sarah said quietly. The words hit Buck like a physical blow. He shot to his feet, the rocking chair spinning wildly behind him, and staggered to the porch railing. His knuckles went white as he gripped the wood, his entire body shaking. Pregnant, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. She found out the morning after your fight. She was going to come back, to tell you, but she was so hurt by what you'd said, so confused about why you'd suddenly turned so cruel. She kept waiting for you to call, to apologize, to give her some sign that you still loved her. Buck turned around, his face etched with anguish. I never called. I thought it was better for her if I stayed away. Sarah stood up, still clutching the envelope. She waited 3 weeks. Then, she decided that maybe you'd meant what you'd said, that maybe you really didn't want the life you'd planned together. So she moved to California. And the baby? Buck's voice cracked on the words. Sarah smiled through her tears. A daughter. She named her Isabella, but everyone called her Bella. Emma raised her alone, never told her who her father was until right before she died. Buck sank into the other rocking chair, his head in his hands. I have a daughter. Had a daughter. Oh God, what have I done? You have a daughter, Sarah corrected gently. Present tense. Bella is very much alive. She's 22 years old, just graduated from UCLA with a degree in veterinary medicine. She's smart, beautiful, and has her mother's kind heart and her father's stubborn determination. Buck looked up sharply. She's alive? My daughter is alive? Sarah nodded, finally, opening the manila envelope she'd carried so far. Emma wanted you to have these. She pulled out a thick stack of photographs, the edges worn from countless handlings. The top picture showed a newborn baby with dark hair and serious eyes. Buck took the photos with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he flipped through them. There was Bella at 6 months, grinning toothlessly at the camera. Bella taking her first steps, her tiny hand gripping Emma's finger. Bella on her first day of school, backpack nearly as big as she was. Bella at 8, missing her 2 front teeth. Bella at 12, gangly and awkward in her school picture. Bella at 16, beautiful and confident at her high school graduation. She looks like you, Sarah said softly, watching Buck study each photo with desperate intensity. Especially around the eyes. Emma used to say that Bella had her father's eyes, and now I know what she meant. Buck came to the final photo, a recent one of Bella in her graduation cap and gown, her arm around Emma's thin frame. Both women were smiling, but Sarah could see the shadow of illness in Emma's face. Where is she now? Buck asked, his voice hoarse. Sarah pulled out a letter from the envelope, Emma's familiar handwriting covering the pages. She's living in San Francisco, working at an animal clinic while she applies for veterinary school. Emma left her a letter too, explaining everything. About you, about why she never told her before, about the fight and the misunderstanding that kept your family apart for 22 years. Buck stared at the letter in Sarah's hands. What did she say? About me? Sarah opened the letter carefully. She said she never stopped loving you. That not a day went by when she didn't think about you, wonder what might have been if you'd both been brave enough to fight for your love instead of walking away from it. The porch light flickered on automatically as the last traces of sunlight faded from the sky. In the golden glow, Buck looked older than his 52 years, worn down by decades of regret and loneliness. She said she understood why you pushed her away, Sarah continued reading. She said she figured out years later that you must have had a reason, something that made you think she'd be better off without you. She wanted you to know that you were wrong. Buck wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Is she angry? My daughter, is she angry at me? Sarah pulled out another letter, this one in younger handwriting. Bella wrote you a letter too. Emma gave it to me before she died, made me promise to deliver it along with everything else. Buck took the letter with trembling hands but couldn't seem to make himself open it. "She wants to meet you," Sarah said gently. "She's not angry. She's curious, maybe a little nervous, but not angry. Emma made sure she understood that you didn't know about her, that you would have been there if you had." Buck stared out at his ranch, the place he'd built with his own hands, the legacy he thought would die with him. "I don't know how to be a father. I never learned." "None of us know how to be parents until we are," Sarah replied. "But you loved her mother, and that's a good start." They sat together in comfortable silence as the night settled around them. The crickets were in full chorus now, joined by the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. It was peaceful, this place Buck had built, the kind of place where a child could grow up surrounded by wide open spaces and honest work. Finally, Buck opened Bella's letter. Sarah watched his face as he read, saw the wonder and hope bloom in his eyes. When he finished, he folded it carefully and held it against his chest. "She wants to come here," he said wonderingly. "She wants to see the ranch, to meet me." Sarah smiled. Emma thought she might. She said Bella always loved animals, always talked about wanting to work on a ranch someday instead of in a city clinic. Buck stood up suddenly, pacing to the end of the porch and back. "I need to clean the guest room. And fix the loose board on the front steps. The barn could use another coat of paint, and I should probably get some groceries. Do you think she likes Mexican food? Emma always loved my enchiladas." Sarah laughed, the first real laugh she'd had in months. "I think she'd love to try your enchiladas. But, Buck, you don't have to change everything overnight. She just wants to meet her father." Buck stopped pacing and looked at Sarah with eyes that held more life than they'd had since she'd arrived. "When? When does she want to come?" Sarah pulled out one final piece of paper from the envelope. "She's driving down from San Francisco next weekend. She'll be here Saturday afternoon." Buck's face went pale again. "Next Saturday? As in 6 days from now?" "Emma thought it would be better not to give you too much time to worry about it," Sarah explained. "She knew you, said you'd probably work yourself into a panic if you had too long to think about it." Buck laughed despite his nervousness. "She always did know me too well." They talked for another hour, Sarah sharing stories about Emma's life in California, about Bella's childhood and dreams. Buck told her about the ranch, about the changes he'd made over the years, about the quiet life he'd built for himself after losing the only woman he'd ever loved. When Sarah finally got up to leave, Buck walked her to her truck. "Thank you," he said simply. "For coming all this way, for keeping your promise to Emma. I know this couldn't have been easy." Sarah climbed into her pickup and rolled down the window. "Emma said something else right before she died. She said she hoped that maybe, somehow, the three of you could finally be a family. Even if it's not the way she'd originally dreamed it." As Sarah drove away, her taillights disappearing into the darkness, Buck stood in his driveway for a long time, looking up at the stars that seemed brighter than they had in years. Somewhere out there, his daughter was probably looking at the same stars, wondering about the father she'd never known. He had 6 days to prepare for the most important meeting of his life. 6 days to figure out how to be the father he should have been all along. And, for the first time in 23 years, Buck Richardson felt like his life might finally be beginning instead of ending. The manila envelope sat on his kitchen table that night, its contents spread out like pieces of a puzzle he was finally ready to solve. Photos of the daughter he'd never known he had, letters from the woman he'd never stopped loving, and the promise of a future he'd given up hope of ever having. Outside, the night sounds of the ranch continued their eternal song, but now they seemed to be singing about new beginnings rather than endings. Tomorrow, he would start preparing for Saturday. Tomorrow, he would begin the journey toward becoming the father Bella deserved. But tonight, he would sit with Emma's photos and remember the woman who had changed his life twice, once when she'd loved him, and again when she'd given him the greatest gift of all, their daughter. Buck Richardson hadn't slept more than 2 hours straight since Sarah Mitchell had driven away 6 nights ago. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's face as it had been 23 years ago, young and radiant and full of dreams they'd never gotten to share. Then, he'd see Bella in the photographs, and his heart would race with a mixture of joy and terror that left him wide awake, staring at the ceiling until dawn. It was Friday morning, and his daughter would arrive tomorrow afternoon. The ranch had never looked better. Buck had worked from sunrise to sunset every day since Monday, channeling his nervous energy into every repair project he could find. The guest room now sported fresh paint and new curtains that he'd driven 40 miles to buy, choosing a soft yellow color because he remembered Emma saying it was cheerful. The loose board on the front steps was not only fixed, but the entire porch had been restained. The barn gleamed with a fresh coat of red paint, and he'd even organized his tool shed, something he'd been putting off for 3 years. His neighbor, Maria Gonzalez, had stopped by Wednesday with a casserole and stayed to help him clean the house from top to bottom. Maria was 65, had raised 5 children of her own, and possessed the kind of no-nonsense wisdom that came from decades of dealing with nervous fathers. "Mijo," she'd said, watching Buck rearrange the living room furniture for the 3rd time that day, "your daughter is coming to meet you, not to judge your housekeeping. Stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be yourself." But Buck couldn't help himself. For 22 years, he'd missed every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone in his daughter's life. The least he could do was make sure everything was perfect for her first visit home. Home. The word felt strange in his mind. The Double R had been his sanctuary for so long, his refuge from a world that seemed determined to disappoint him. Now he was hoping it could be something more, a place where his daughter might feel she belonged, a bridge between the life she'd lived in California and the heritage she'd never known she had. Friday afternoon found Buck in the kitchen, attempting to make a batch of his famous enchiladas. His hands shook slightly as he rolled the tortillas, and he had to start the sauce twice after burning the first batch. Maria had offered to cook for tomorrow's visit, but Buck had declined. If Bella was anything like her mother, she'd appreciate the gesture of a home-cooked meal made with love, even if it wasn't perfect. The phone rang just as he was sliding the enchilada pan into the oven. Buck wiped his hands on a dish towel and answered, his heart skipping when he heard a young woman's voice on the other end. "Mr. Richardson? This is Isabella Rodriguez. I think you're my father." Buck's legs gave out, and he sank into the nearest kitchen chair. "Bella," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm your father." There was a long pause, and Buck could hear traffic sounds in the background, the distant hum of highway travel. "I'm sorry to call so late," Bella said, and Buck could hear nervousness in her voice that mirrored his own. "I'm driving through New Mexico right now, and I needed to hear your voice before tomorrow." "Don't apologize," Buck said quickly. "I'm so glad you called. Are you doing okay? Do you need to stop for the night? I can recommend some good places to stay." Bella's laugh was musical, achingly familiar. "I'm okay. I actually like driving at night. It gives me time to think, you know? And I have a lot to think about right now." Buck closed his eyes, wishing he could see her face, wishing he could somehow comfort the daughter he'd never had the chance to know. "Bella, I want you to know that if I had known about you—" "I know," she said softly, cutting him off. "Mom's letter explained everything. About why you fought, about why she left without telling you. I'm not angry, Dad. Is it okay if I call you Dad?" The word hit Buck like a physical blow, so sweet and painful he almost cried out. "Yes," he whispered. "Please. I'd like that very much." They talked for nearly an hour, Bella telling him about her drive, about the landscape she was seeing for the first time, about her nervousness and excitement. Buck found himself relaxing as they spoke, charmed by his daughter's easy manner and quick wit. She had Emma's warmth but also a directness that he recognized as his own. "I brought something for you," Bella said as their conversation began to wind down. "Mom kept a journal for the first 5 years of my life. She wrote in it every day, documenting all my firsts, all the little things she thought you might want to know. She gave it to me before she died and asked me to share it with you." Buck's throat tightened. Even in death, Emma was still giving him gifts, still trying to heal the wounds their separation had caused. "That means everything to me, sweetheart. Everything. I should probably get going, Bella said reluctantly. I want to find a motel soon and get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. Bella? Buck said quickly, afraid she was about to hang up. I love you. I know I don't have the right to say that, and I know you don't know me well enough to say it back, but I need you to know. I've loved you from the moment I learned you existed. There was silence on the other end for so long that Buck wondered if the call had been dropped. Then, he heard Bella sniffling. I love you too, she said quietly. I don't understand it, but I do. Mom used to tell me that love doesn't always make sense, that sometimes your heart recognizes something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. I think that's what's happening here. After they hung up, Buck sat in his kitchen for a long time, listening to the timer tick down on the enchiladas and marveling at the fact that he'd just had his first real conversation with his daughter. She was everything Emma's letters had promised: intelligent, kind, generous with her heart despite having every reason to guard it carefully. The enchiladas were perfect, golden and bubbling with cheese. Buck set them aside to cool and went out to the porch, needing air and space to process everything he was feeling. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in the same shades of orange and pink it had worn the night Sarah had brought him news of his daughter. A week ago, he'd been a lonely rancher with nothing but his land and his memories. Tomorrow, his daughter would walk up these same porch steps, and his whole world would change again. Saturday morning arrived gray and overcast, unusual for Texas in September. Buck woke at 5, as he always did, but instead of heading out to tend the cattle, he found himself standing in the guest room doorway, checking once more that everything was ready. Fresh flowers from Maria's garden sat on the nightstand, and he'd placed one of Emma's photos, the one of her holding newborn Bella, on the dresser where Bella would be sure to see it. By 10 o'clock, Buck had reorganized the kitchen twice, cleaned the bathroom that was already spotless, and fed the horses 3 times their normal breakfast. He was considering repainting the mailbox when Maria's truck pulled into his driveway. Buenos dias, Roberto, she called out, climbing down from her pickup with a covered casserole dish in her hands. How are you holding up? Buck ran a hand through his hair, which he'd combed so many times it was starting to stick up in odd directions. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Do you think the house smells okay? I used that air freshener you bought, but maybe it's too much? Maria set down the casserole and placed her weathered hands on Buck's shoulders. Breathe, Mijo. You're going to make yourself sick with worry. What if she doesn't like me? The words tumbled out before Buck could stop them. What if she takes one look at this place, at me, and decides she made a mistake coming here? Maria's eyes softened with understanding. Roberto, that girl drove halfway across the country to meet you. She wouldn't have done that if she didn't already care. Stop trying to be perfect and just be her father. They spent the next hour in the kitchen, Maria heating up the enchiladas and preparing sides while Buck paced nervously around the house. Every car that passed on the distant highway made his heart race, and he found himself checking his appearance in every mirror he passed. At 2 o'clock, a blue Honda Civic turned into his driveway. Buck's heart stopped. Through the windshield, he could see a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She sat in the car for a moment, and Buck could see her hands gripping the steering wheel, probably gathering her courage the same way he was trying to gather his. Then, she opened the door and stepped out. Buck's breath caught in his throat. Sarah had been right, Bella did look like him, especially around the eyes. But she was also unmistakably Emma's daughter, with the same graceful way of moving, the same tilt to her head when she was thinking. She was tall, maybe 5'7", with an athletic build that spoke of an active lifestyle. She wore jeans, boots, and a simple blue blouse that brought out the color of her eyes. Their eyes met across the yard, and, for a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Bella smiled, Emma's smile, and started walking toward the porch. Buck met her halfway, his legs trembling with each step. When they were 3 feet apart, they both stopped, suddenly, unsure of the protocol for this moment. Do you hug a daughter you've never met? Shake hands? Stand there awkwardly until someone else breaks the tension? Hi, Dad, Bella said softly, and Buck's uncertainty evaporated. Hi, sweetheart, he replied, opening his arms. Bella stepped into his embrace, and Buck felt something he'd been missing his entire life click into place. She was tall enough that her head fit perfectly against his shoulder, and she hugged him with the kind of fierce intensity that told him she'd been needing this moment as much as he had. They held each other for a long time, 22 years of separation dissolving in the warmth of that first father-daughter hug. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. "You're real," Bella said, laughing through her tears. "I mean, I knew you were real, but seeing you, hugging you, it's different than I imagined." Buck wiped his eyes with his sleeve, not caring that he probably looked like a mess. "You're so beautiful. You look so much like your mother, but you have my stubborn chin." Bella laughed and touched her chin self-consciously. "Mom always said I got my determination from somewhere. She said she could tell when I was being stubborn because I'd stick my chin out just like someone she used to know." They walked up to the porch together, Buck carrying Bella's overnight bag and trying not to stare at his daughter too obviously. He wanted to memorize everything about this moment, the way the afternoon light caught in her hair, the sound of her laughter, the way she looked at his ranch with curious, appreciative eyes. "This place is incredible," Bella said as they reached the porch. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the rolling hills, the well-maintained buildings, the cattle grazing in the distance. "It's exactly how Mom described it, but somehow more beautiful." "She talked about the ranch?" Buck asked, settling into one of the rocking chairs and gesturing for Bella to take the other. Bella nodded, sinking into the chair with a sigh of contentment. "All the time." She described the sunsets, the way the morning mist looked rising from the pastures, the sound of cattle calling to each other at dusk. She said it was the most peaceful place she'd ever been. Buck felt his throat tighten. "She loved it here. I used to think she'd get bored, coming from the city, but she took to ranch life like she was born to it." "I can see why," Bella said, looking out at the landscape with Emma's appreciative eyes. "There's something healing about all this space, isn't there? All this quiet." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of the windmill, the rustle of wind through the mesquite trees. Buck found himself stealing glances at his daughter, still hardly able to believe she was really here. "I brought Mom's journal," Bella said eventually, reaching into her purse and pulling out a leather-bound book that was clearly well worn. "And some other things I thought you might like to see." Buck accepted the journal with reverent hands. The leather was soft with age, and Emma's name was embossed in gold letters on the cover. Inside, her familiar handwriting filled page after page with observations about their baby daughter. Bella smiled for the first time today. Buck read aloud from the first entry. "A real smile, not just gas like the books say. She looked right at me and grinned like she knew a secret. I wish Robert could have seen it." Buck's vision blurred, and he had to stop reading. Bella reached over and squeezed his hand. "There are 5 years' worth of entries like that," she said gently. "Mom documented everything she thought you'd want to know. My first steps, my first words, the day I learned to ride a bicycle. She even wrote about the ordinary stuff, the way I liked to have my hair brushed, how I insisted on wearing my red boots everywhere, the lullaby that always put me to sleep." Buck wiped his eyes and managed a watery smile. "What was the lullaby?" Bella's cheeks turned pink. "Promise you won't laugh?" "It was Mama's 'Don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys.' Mom said it was ironic, considering." Buck threw back his head and laughed, a real laugh that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. "That's perfect. That's so Emma." Bella grinned, clearly pleased by his reaction. "I still remember all the words. Sometimes I catch myself humming it when I'm nervous." They spent the next 2 hours going through the journal together, Buck reading aloud while Bella provided commentary and additional stories. There were photos tucked between the pages: Bella's first Halloween costume, a tiny cowgirl, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, school performances. Emma had documented everything with the devotion of a mother who knew her daughter's father was missing it all. "She never dated anyone seriously," Bella said when Buck wondered aloud whether Emma had found happiness with someone else. "Oh, she had friends, and there were a few men who asked her out over the years. But she always said she'd already found the love of her life, and lightning doesn't strike twice." Buck had to look away, overcome by the weight of all the years they'd lost. I should have fought for her. Should have told her the truth instead of pushing her away. Maybe, Bella agreed. But, Mom said she should have been braver too. Should have come back after she found out she was pregnant, should have demanded answers instead of just accepting that you didn't want her anymore. She said you were both too young and too proud for your own good. As the afternoon wore on, they moved from the porch to the barn, where Buck showed Bella his horses. She had a natural way with animals, approaching them with calm confidence and winning them over with gentle touches and soft words. His mare, Buttercup, who was usually skittish with strangers, let Bella brush her mane and feed her carrots from her palm. Mom taught me to ride when I was 6, Bella explained, running her hands over Buttercup's neck with practiced ease. She found this little stable outside the city and convinced them to let us come on weekends. She said every girl should know how to ride, especially one with cowboy blood. Do you still ride? Buck asked, watching his daughter interact with his horses and feeling a fierce pride bloom in his chest. Not as much as I'd like. Hard to find good riding opportunities in San Francisco. But, I've been thinking. She trailed off, looking suddenly shy. Thinking what? Bella took a deep breath. I've been thinking about leaving the city. Maybe finding a job somewhere with more space, more animals. Somewhere I could have horses of my own. Buck's heart began to race, but he forced himself to keep his voice casual. Any particular place in mind? Well, Bella said, not meeting his eyes, I hear Texas has some good veterinary opportunities. Lots of ranches that need someone to take care of their animals. Buck couldn't hide his smile. Texas is a big state. Any particular part of Texas? Bella grinned, finally, looking at him directly. I was thinking maybe somewhere around here. Somewhere I could get to know my father a little better. Buck felt like his heart might explode with joy. I'd like that, sweetheart. I'd like that very much. They walked back to the house as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Maria had left the casserole warming in the oven, and they sat down to dinner together, Buck's enchiladas, Maria's rice and beans, and a salad Bella insisted on making because she said she'd been eating nothing but fast food for 3 days. Over dinner, they continued sharing stories. Buck told Bella about his bull riding days, about how he'd met her mother, about the dreams they'd shared for their future together. Bella told him about growing up in California, about her love for animals, about her mother's quiet strength during her final illness. She wasn't scared at the end, Bella said, pushing rice around on her plate. She said she was ready to go, that she'd lived a good life and raised a daughter she was proud of. But she was worried about you, about how you'd react when you learned the truth. She made me promise that if I ever contacted you, I'd tell you that she forgave you. That she understood why you did what you did. Buck felt tears prick his eyes again. I don't deserve forgiveness. I stole 22 years from all of us. No, Bella said firmly. You made a mistake. A big one, but a mistake born out of love, not selfishness. Mom understood that. And so do I. After dinner, they sat on the porch again, drinking coffee and watching the stars come out. The night was clear and cool, perfect for stargazing, and Buck pointed out constellations while Bella told him about her work at the animal clinic. I've always been drawn to large animals, she said. Horses, cattle, sheep. There's something about their calm strength that speaks to me. I suppose that makes sense now, knowing where I come from. Your mother was the same way, Buck said. She was never afraid of the cattle, even the bulls. Said they could sense that she respected them, so they respected her back. I'd love to hear more stories about her, Bella said softly. About what she was like when she was young, when you two were together. I only knew her as my mother, but I want to know what she was like as a woman in love. Buck spent the next hour painting word pictures of Emma as she'd been at 26, vibrant, funny, passionate about life and love and the future they were building together. He told Bella about Emma's laugh, about the way she'd sing while she cooked, about how she'd dance around the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. She sounds wonderful, Bella said when he finished. I wish you could have had more time together. Me too, Buck said. But, I'm grateful for the time we had. And, I'm grateful that somehow, through all the pain and separation, she gave me you. As the evening wound down, Buck showed Bella to the guest room he'd prepared so carefully. She exclaimed over the flowers, over the photos he'd placed on the dresser, over the quilt his grandmother had made that now covered the bed. "This is perfect, Dad," she said, hugging him goodnight. "Thank you for making me feel so welcome." Buck kissed the top of her head, marveling at the naturalness of the gesture. "Thank you for coming home, sweetheart. Thank you for giving me a chance." That night, Buck lay in bed listening to the sounds of someone else in his house, water running in the bathroom, footsteps on the floorboards, the soft creak of the guest room bed as Bella settled in for sleep. For the first time in 23 years, the Double R Ranch felt complete. He thought about Emma, about how proud she would be to see their daughter grown into such an amazing young woman. He thought about the journal entries he still had to read, about the stories Bella had yet to tell him, about the future they were building together one conversation at a time. Most of a Buck woke to the sound of someone moving around in his kitchen. For a moment, he lay still in confusion, his sleep-foggy brain trying to process the unfamiliar sounds of another person in his house. Then, memory came flooding back, and he smiled despite himself. His daughter was making breakfast. He dressed quickly and made his way to the kitchen, stopping in the doorway to watch Bella work. She'd found his apron and tied it around her waist, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun as she stood at the stove flipping pancakes. Coffee was already brewing, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, and she'd somehow found the good plates his mother had given him years ago, the ones he never used because eating alone felt too formal for China. "Good morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Bella turned and smiled, flour dusting her cheek. "Morning, Dad. I hope you don't mind that I raided your kitchen. I'm an early riser, and I thought I'd return the favor after that amazing dinner last night." Buck's heart did that little skip it had been doing every time she called him Dad. He wondered if he'd ever get used to it, or if it would always feel like a small miracle. "I don't mind at all. It's been a long time since this kitchen saw a proper breakfast." "Well, get ready for some California-style pancakes with Texas honey," Bella said, sliding a stack of golden pancakes onto a plate. "I found your stash of honey in the pantry. Do you keep bees?" "My neighbor does. Maria trades me honey for beef." Buck poured himself coffee and settled at the kitchen table, marveling at how natural it felt to have Bella bustling around his kitchen like she belonged there. "She's the one who helped me get ready for your visit. I was a nervous wreck." Bella laughed, joining him at the table with her own plate. "You? Nervous? I was so scared driving up yesterday that I almost turned around 3 times. I kept thinking, what if he doesn't like me? What if I'm nothing like what he hoped for?" Buck reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Sweetheart, you're everything I could have hoped for and more. You're kind, smart, beautiful, and you have your mother's generous heart. I couldn't be prouder to call you my daughter." They ate breakfast together as the morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, talking about everything and nothing. Bella told him about her drive from California, about the small town she'd passed through and the landscapes that had taken her breath away. Buck found himself sharing stories about his childhood on the ranch, about learning to ride from his grandfather, about the hard years after his parents died when he'd almost lost the property to debt. "I always wondered what it would be like to grow up in one place," Bella said, cutting another bite of pancake. "We moved a lot when I was little. Mom was always chasing better teaching jobs, better opportunities. I think part of her was always searching for something she'd lost." Buck felt the familiar pang of regret that had become his constant companion since learning about his daughter. "I wish things had been different. I wish you could have grown up here." "Maybe," Bella said thoughtfully. "But, then, I wouldn't be who I am now. All those moves taught me to adapt, to be independent. And, living in the city gave me opportunities one might not have had here. Sometimes I think everything happens for a reason, even the painful things." After breakfast, Buck gave Bella the grand tour of the ranch. They started with the cattle, and Buck was amazed by his daughter's natural understanding of the animals. She had no fear of the massive bulls, approaching them with calm confidence and earning their respect with her quiet manner. Mom was right, Bella said, scratching behind the ears of a particularly friendly heifer. There is something peaceful about cattle. They're so present, you know? No anxiety about the future or regrets about the past. Just here, now, in this moment. Your mother used to say the same thing, Buck said, watching his daughter with growing admiration. She said cattle were better teachers than most humans when it came to living in the present. They spent the morning riding together, Bella on Buttercup and Buck on his gelding, Rex. Despite not having ridden regularly in years, Bella sat her horse like she was born to it, moving with the same natural grace her mother had possessed. They rode the property boundaries, Buck pointing out landmarks and sharing the history of the land while Bella asked thoughtful questions about ranch management and cattle breeding. Have you ever thought about expanding? Bella asked as they paused on a hilltop overlooking the main pasture. You've got good water sources, solid fencing, healthy cattle. This place could support a bigger herd. Buck was impressed by her observations. I've thought about it, but expansion means taking on debt, and I learned my lesson about that when I was younger. Besides, this place is probably too big for one man to manage properly as it is. Bella was quiet for a moment, looking out over the rolling hills. What if it wasn't just one man managing it? Buck's heart began to race, but he forced himself to keep his voice steady. What are you thinking, sweetheart? I've been doing a lot of thinking during the drive down here, Bella said, not meeting his eyes. About my life in San Francisco, about what I really want from my career, from my future. The truth is, I've been feeling restless for months. The city clinic is fine, but it's all small animals, routine procedures. I want something bigger, something that feels more meaningful. Buck waited, afraid to hope for what he thought she might be suggesting. I was wondering, Bella continued, her voice gaining strength, if you might be interested in a partner. Someone who could help expand the operation, maybe add a veterinary component. I have some savings, and I could get a loan for the rest. We could start small, maybe add a few dozen head, build proper medical facilities for the cattle. Buck stared at his daughter, hardly able to believe what he was hearing. You'd want to do that? Give up your life in California to work on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, Texas? Bella finally looked at him, and Buck saw Emma's determination shining in her eyes. Dad, I spent 22 years not knowing where I came from, not understanding why I always felt like something was missing. Yesterday, when I saw this place, when I met you, it was like finding a piece of myself I didn't even know was lost. This isn't the middle of nowhere to me. This is home. Buck felt tears prick his eyes. Are you sure? Ranch life is hard work, long hours, and there's no guarantee of success. City living has a lot more conveniences, more opportunities. I'm sure, Bella said firmly. Besides, it wouldn't just be a business partnership. I want to get to know my father, and I can't do that from 2,000 miles away. Buck reached over and took her hand, squeezing it tight. Then, yes, sweetheart. Yes, I'd love to have you as a partner. In business and in life. They rode back to the house in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts of the future they were suddenly planning together. Buck couldn't stop stealing glances at his daughter, amazed by her strength and determination, by the way she seemed to instinctively understand what the ranch meant to him and what it could become with the right vision. That afternoon, they spread papers across the kitchen table and began making concrete plans. Bella had clearly given this a lot of thought during her drive, producing a notebook filled with ideas about expansion possibilities, veterinary services they could offer to neighboring ranches, and marketing strategies for their beef. We should think about sustainable practices too, Bella said, sketching out ideas for rotational grazing patterns. Consumers are increasingly interested in grass-fed, environmentally responsible beef. We could position ourselves as a premium operation. Buck was amazed by his daughter's business acumen. Where did you learn all this? Bella grinned. I minored in business in college, and I've been reading everything I can get my hands on about modern ranching practices. Mom always said I inherited your stubborn streak. When I get interested in something, I research it to death. They worked until dinner time, their plans growing more detailed and ambitious with each passing hour. Buck found himself getting excited about the ranch in a way he hadn't felt in years. Having Bella's energy and vision to complement his experience and knowledge felt like the perfect combination. "There's something else I want to discuss," Bella said as they took a break to heat up leftovers for dinner. "I know this is presumptuous, and feel free to say no, but I was wondering about Mom." Buck's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What about her?" "Well, she's buried in a little cemetery in California, but she always talked about how much she loved this place. I was wondering if you'd be okay with me having her remains moved here." "There's probably a family cemetery somewhere on the property, right?" Buck had to set down his fork as emotion overwhelmed him. "There is," he managed to say. "Up on the hill behind the house. My parents and grandparents are buried there." "I thought maybe she'd like to be here," Bella said softly. "Where she was happiest, with the family she never got to have." Buck wiped his eyes with his napkin. "I think she'd love that, sweetheart. I think she'd love being part of the ranch forever." That evening, they sat on the porch again, but this time they weren't getting to know each other, they were planning a shared future. They talked about the house, about adding a second bathroom and maybe expanding the kitchen. They discussed building a proper veterinary clinic in one of the outbuildings, about the equipment Bella would need, about getting her license to practice in Texas. "I'll need to go back to California to wrap things up," Bella said as the conversation began to wind down. "Give notice at the clinic, pack up my apartment, arrange for Mom's remains to be moved. It'll probably take a month or two." Buck felt a stab of panic at the thought of her leaving, even temporarily. "You're sure about this? About giving up your life there?" Bella reached over and took his hand. "Dad, I don't have a life there. I have a job and an apartment, but I don't have a family. I don't have roots. I don't have a place where I belong. Here, with you, I have all of those things." Buck squeezed her hand tightly. "This will always be your home, Bella. Whether you're here or not, this will always be your place." "I know," she said simply. "That's why I can leave. Because I finally have somewhere to come back to." Sunday morning came too soon. Buck woke early and made coffee, then sat on the porch watching the sunrise and trying not to think about the fact that in a few hours, his daughter would drive away. They'd had less than 48 hours together, but it felt like she'd been part of his life forever. Bella joined him on the porch with her own cup of coffee, already dressed in jeans and a sweater for the long drive ahead. Her overnight bag sat by the door, a stark reminder that this magical weekend was coming to an end. "I have something for you," Buck said, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have something of mine to take with you." Bella unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a silver belt buckle worn smooth with age. "It was my grandfather's," Buck explained. "He gave it to me when I was 16, said it would bring me luck and keep me safe. I wore it every time I rode bulls, and later when I was working the ranch. I want you to have it." Bella held the buckle up to catch the morning light, tracing the intricate design with her finger. "Dad, this is too precious. It's been in your family for generations." "And now your family," Buck said simply. "You're my daughter, and someday maybe you'll have children of your own to pass it on to. That's how family heirlooms are supposed to work." Bella's eyes filled with tears as she hugged him tightly. "I'll treasure it always. And I'll be back before you know it." "I'm going to miss you," Buck said, his voice thick with emotion. "These 2 days have been the best of my life." "Mine too," Bella whispered against his shoulder. "But this isn't goodbye, Dad. This is just see you soon." They had breakfast together one last time, lingering over coffee and making lists of things they needed to research before Bella's return. Buck found himself memorizing everything about this morning, the way the sunlight caught in his daughter's hair, the sound of her laughter, the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. Finally, it was time. Buck walked Bella to her car, carrying her bag and trying to think of reasons to delay her departure just a few more minutes. But they both knew she had a long drive ahead, and responsibilities waiting for her in California. Drive safe, Buck said, hugging her one more time. Call me when you stop for the night, and again when you get home. I will, Bella promised. And, Dad? Start thinking about what kind of cattle you want to add first. I have some ideas, but this is your ranch. I want to do this right. Our ranch, Buck corrected gently. From now on, it's our ranch. Bella smiled through her tears. Our ranch. I like the sound of that. Buck stood in his driveway long after Bella's car had disappeared down the highway, watching the dust settle and feeling the profound silence that settled over the ranch in her absence. But, this time, the silence wasn't lonely. This time, it was full of promise, full of plans and dreams and the knowledge that his daughter would be coming home. That evening, Buck called Maria to tell her about the weekend, about Bella's decision to move to Texas, about their plans for expanding the ranch. Maria listened with the patience of a woman who had watched Buck grieve his lost love for 23 years. She sounds wonderful, Mijo, Maria said when he finished. Emma would be so proud of the woman she raised, and so proud of the father you're going to be. I hope so, Buck said. I have a lot of years to make up for. No, Maria said firmly. You have a future to build. The past is gone, Roberto. What matters now is what you do with the gift you've been given. Over the next weeks, Buck threw himself into preparation for Bella's return with the same intensity he'd once brought to his bull riding career. He researched cattle breeds, investigated the cost of building a veterinary clinic, and consulted with agricultural extension agents about sustainable ranching practices. He also spent hours reading Emma's journal, learning about the daughter he'd missed raising and the woman who had loved them both enough to make sure they eventually found each other. Bella called every few days with updates on her progress in California. She'd given notice at the clinic and found a buyer for her apartment furniture. She'd arranged for a moving company to ship her belongings and had started the process of having Emma's remains transferred to Texas. Most importantly, she'd applied for her Texas veterinary license and been accepted to take the state board exams. I should be ready to leave in about 6 weeks, she told him during one of their evening phone calls. I found a company that specializes in transporting livestock medical equipment, so the clinic setup should be straightforward once I get there. I've been working on converting the old grain storage building, Buck told her. It's got good bones, and it's positioned perfectly for access from the main road. I think it'll make a perfect veterinary clinic. I can't wait to see it, Bella said. And, Dad? I've been thinking about something. What would you say to hosting an open house once we get the clinic up and running? Let all the neighboring ranchers know what services we can provide? Buck smiled, impressed once again by his daughter's business instincts. I think that's a great idea, sweetheart. Your mother would have loved that. She always said ranchers needed to stick together more. 6 weeks later, Buck stood in his driveway watching a convoy of vehicles approach, Bella's Honda, followed by a moving truck and a specialized trailer carrying veterinary equipment. His daughter was coming home for good. Bella jumped out of her car and ran to him, and Buck caught her in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. She was tan from her weeks of preparation in the California sun, her hair longer than it had been during her first visit, but her smile was exactly the same. Welcome home, sweetheart, Buck said, his voice thick with emotion. It's good to be here, Dad, Bella replied, looking around at the ranch with eyes that now held ownership and belonging. Ready to get to work? The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity. Together, Buck and Bella expanded the herd, adding 50 head of premium breeding cattle and beginning the process of transitioning to grass-fed, sustainable practices. The veterinary clinic was completed ahead of schedule, equipped with everything from basic medical supplies to a surgical suite capable of handling emergency procedures. Bella passed her Texas veterinary boards with flying colors and immediately began building relationships with neighboring ranchers. Word spread quickly about the young, skilled veterinarian who had come home to help her father expand the RR, and soon they were fielding calls for services from ranches within a 50-mile radius. The open house was held on a beautiful Saturday in early spring, and Buck was amazed by the turnout. Ranchers came from across the county to tour the facilities, meet Bella, and sample Maria's famous tamales. By the end of the day, Bella had scheduled appointments for the next 3 weeks, and several ranchers had expressed interest in purchasing breeding bulls from their expanding herd. "I think we can officially call this a success," Bella said that evening as they sat on the porch, exhausted but happy. "Mom would have been so proud of what we've built here." Buck looked out over his land, their land now, and felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. The ranch that had once been his refuge from heartbreak had become something larger and more meaningful, a legacy he and his daughter were building together, a bridge between the past they'd missed and the future they were creating. "She is proud," Buck said softly. "I can feel her here sometimes, especially in the evenings when the light is just right. She's proud of you for having the courage to come home, and proud of us for finding our way back to each other." Emma's grave on the hill behind the house was marked now with a simple headstone that read, "Emma Rodriguez, beloved mother, teacher, and friend, finally, home." Bella had planted wildflowers around the grave, the kind that would bloom every spring in brilliant colors, and Buck often found himself stopping there during his morning walks to talk to the woman who had given him the greatest gift of his life. One evening, as Buck and Bella worked together in the barn treating a calf with a minor injury, she looked up from her work and smiled at him. "You know what the best part of all this is?" she said, gently bandaging the calf's leg while Buck held it still. "What's that, sweetheart?" "I finally understand what Mom meant when she used to talk about feeling complete. I never knew what was missing until I found it." Bella finished with the bandage and stood up, brushing hay from her jeans. "This place, this work, this life with you, this is what I was always meant to be doing." Buck felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I feel the same way. For 23 years, I thought my life was over, that I'd lost my chance at happiness. But I was wrong. It wasn't over, it was just waiting to begin." As they walked back to the house together, father and daughter side by side, Buck thought about the mysterious ways that love finds to heal itself, even across years and miles and misunderstandings that seem impossible to bridge. Sarah Mitchell had ridden onto his ranch at dusk carrying a truth he couldn't ignore, but what she'd really brought him was a second chance at the family he'd always dreamed of having. Now, as the Texas sun set behind the rolling hills and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Buck Richardson finally understood that some stories don't end with heartbreak. Some stories end with coming home. He thought about second chances, about the grace that sometimes allows people to find their way back to each other despite the mistakes that drove them apart. Tomorrow, he and Bella would have their first full day as father and daughter. There would be more stories to share, more memories to make, and, maybe, if he was very lucky, the beginning of the family he'd always dreamed of having. Outside his window, the night sounds of the ranch continued their eternal song, but tonight they seemed to be singing a lullaby about forgiveness and love and the power of family to heal even the deepest wounds.